Hello and welcome back. In this lesson, we're going to talk about EC2 placement groups and their importance when looking to set up the proper architecture for your application. So for EC2 placement groups, we're going to go back into EC2 Essentials and click on Placement Groups. So let's talk a little bit about what placement groups are. So a placement group is a cluster of EC2 instances within the same availability zone. Now, these are used for applications that require an extremely low latency network between them. So what happens is that AWS attempts to place all the instances as close as physically possible in the data center to reduce latency. Instances within a placement group have a low latency, 10 gigabits per second network connection between them, and instances that are in a placement group need to have enhanced networking in order to maximize placement groups. So over here in the EC2 console, we can find placements group right here under placement groups. Now, just to kind of reiterate what's going on here, these are for applications that are going to require multiple instances, but that are going to require extremely low latency between them so they can communicate with each other as quickly as possible. So obviously this is going to be something that is a very specific case, but you need to be aware of what placement groups are and the fact that AWS does offer them as an option. Now, it is important to understand that there are several things that we need to know about troubleshooting placement groups. So, first is that if an instance in a placement group is stopped, once it is started again, it will continue to be a member of the placement group. Also, it is suggested to launch all the required instances within a placement group in a single request, and that the same instance type is used for all instances within the placement group. So let's say that you need 10 instances to run your application. It is best practice to provision all those 10 EC2 instances at once when creating a placement group. Also, it is possible if more instances are added at a later time to a placement group, or if a placement group instance is stopped and started again, to receive an insufficient capacity error. So I want you to remember this. When talking about placement groups, it is possible to receive an insufficient capacity error. Now, you need to know how to resolve this. I'll repeat that. You need to know how to resolve this. And you can resolve the capacity error by stopping all instances in the member group and attempting to start them again. So if you receive or if you see something which reference an insufficient capacity error in terms of placement groups, to resolve that issue, the answer would be to stop all instances in the placement group and start them again. And that should resolve the insufficient capacity error. Some other important facts that we need to know about placement groups. One is that instances not originally launched or created in the placement group cannot be moved into the placement group. So I can't have a placement group provision an EC2 instance outside of the placement group and then have it moved into the placement group. If I want it to be in the placement group, I have to provision it inside of the placement group itself. Also, placement groups cannot be merged together, so I can't have two placement groups that are merged together into one. Placement groups cannot span multiple availability zones because that would defeat the purpose of having the low latency network between them inside one availability zone. Placement group names must be unique within your own AWS account. Placement groups cannot be connected, meaning that I cannot connect one placement group to another one and have that be a way of merging them. Also, instances must have a 10 gigabit network speed in order to take advantage of placement groups. So this means proper instance type. So if we go over to our EC2 instances here and launch a new instance, and we want to look at our instance type, what we need to look for is that it must have a 10 gigabit network speed. So it must have a minimum of 10 gigabit. So we must select an instance type and a family which offers network performance of at least 10 gigabit in order for it to work within a placement group. So it's very important to understand when architecting out your infrastructure for your application. So again, just to recap, if you have an application that needs multiple EC2 instances that need to have an extremely fast, low latency network between them so they can communicate between each other as quickly as possible, you will want to provision them into a placement group. And that will provide you with EC2 instances that are physically located as close as possible within an AWS data center. And with that, we will conclude this lesson. Thank you for watching. You may now move on.